The Legend of the Asshole Squirrel. Adult Fairy Tales, Book 1. Written by Seth Chambers. Narrated by Noah DeBias. Sound design by Noah DeBias. My friends, do you know the legend of the asshole squirrel? Well, it goes something like this. Chapter 1. A neighborhood association is formed. Once upon a time, there lived an alligator who was quite happy, except his job didn't pay much, and he had a neighbor who was a little asshole. This asshole neighbor was a squirrel who loved to bitch at the alligator and call him names. Often, when the alligator said, "Morning, squirrel," the rodent said, "Good morning, dumbass." Another thing this asshole squirrel did that irritated the alligator was go chitter, chitter, chitter while whipping his stupid little tail. Not all squirrels are assholes, but this one was. Maybe the squirrel was an asshole out of frustration over being a failed actor. He dreamt of someday becoming a great movie legend like his hero Tom Cruise, but was stuck in Florida working for a tiny theater where critics had blasted his portrayal of Julius Caesar as being uninspired. Or maybe he was an asshole because that was just his nature. One day, the alligator got fed up with the squirrel's bullshit, so that night he went into his garage and began to build. He built a 60mm machine gun, a flamethrower, and a grenade launcher. The alligator strapped all these weapons onto his back and was very pleased with himself. You might be wondering how this alligator was able to build a machine gun, a flamethrower, and a grenade launcher, all from scraps of metal he had lying around in his garage. But there are many mysteries in life to which we may never know the answers, and this is just one more. It is important to maintain a sense of wonder, ladies and gentlemen. The next morning, when the alligator strolled down his driveway to get the Sunday paper, the squirrel ran out of his house and shouted, "What's all that stupid junk on your back? You are a very stupid animal." Then the squirrel whipped his tail and went chitter, chitter, chitter. The alligator smiled and immediately grabbed the 60mm machine gun and opened fire at the squirrel. The squirrel bolted for his front door, but the fusillade cut him off, so he dashed toward his favorite tree. The alligator shot off the front of the tree until it fell, so the poor rodent just kept running. When the machine gun began to overheat, the alligator stopped firing and lumbered after the squirrel while firing up his flamethrower. The flames missed the squirrel but hit the rodent's Hyundai. You might be wondering how a squirrel could own or operate a Hyundai. Again, we dwell in a mysterious world, don't we? The Hyundai's gas tank exploded. The sound was so thunderous that the alligator could barely hear himself laugh. Neighbors called the police and the fire department, and the braver ones stepped out of their houses to see what was happening. The alligator launched grenades at the squirrel. They missed the squirrel but blew up trees and cars and houses. One destroyed a fire hydrant, releasing a great geyser of water from the ground. The alligator laughed so hard his belly hurt. By this time, the poor little squirrel was screaming and crying and running in circles. The alligator didn't even know squirrels could scream because he didn't watch Animal Planet, but scream he did. Miraculously, the rodent managed to survive and even get away, but was also regretting the way he had treated his neighbor. After the squirrel ran far away and out of the alligator's sight, the big reptile thought, "Well, maybe that squirrel was a pretty shitty neighbor, but I should have tried talking to him instead. Maybe we could have gone bowling together or something." But he didn't mean it, because it really was hilarious watching the asshole squirrel run for his life. Today's vocabulary word is schadenfreude. Schadenfreude. Noun. A German word denoting the pleasure one derives from the pain, suffering, and/or misfortune of other people. Alligators are particularly susceptible to this condition. Some of the neighbors were very upset with the alligator, saying that perhaps he had overreacted to the squirrel's taunts. Others sympathized with him, saying, "Yeah, that squirrel really was an asshole, and he done got what he deserved." After a lot of debate, it was decided that there should be rules against attacking asshole squirrels with 60mm machine guns, flamethrowers, and grenade launchers before 9 o'clock in the morning, especially on weekends. This is how neighborhood associations are formed. Afterwards, the squirrel was called to testify against the alligator, but was too scared, and said that he didn't care to press charges. He awoke screaming with horrible nightmares every night. On the bright side for the squirrel, his insurance company eventually replaced his Hyundai, after numerous long, exasperating phone calls. The squirrel was very polite to the insurance agent, because he suspected he might be an alligator. Right after getting the new car, the squirrel packed his shit and moved to Omaha, where he was much kinder to his neighbors, especially those who owned garages. He also started seeing a therapist to help him with his nightmares and anxiety. As for the alligator, he was sentenced to 3 months community service, in which he had to deliver sandwiches to shut-ins. While doing this, he formed valuable connections within the food service industry, and soon afterward went into the catering business, earning far more money than ever before in his life. In fact, being sentenced to community service had turned out to be the best thing to ever happen to the alligator. Networking is important. Perhaps the moral of this story is to practice communication before resorting to 60mm machine guns, flamethrowers, and grenade launchers. Or maybe the moral is to always have a well-stocked garage, so as to deal with whatever problems might arise in life. But more likely, the moral of the story is this: never screw with an alligator. Chapter 2. Why Squirrels Should Not Operate Snowmobiles. The squirrel built a new life in Omaha, but it wasn't easy. He had to work his furry little ass off. He tried desperately to land a sales position, but nobody was hiring, so he broke down and took a job scrubbing dishes. He had quick little hands and did well. He put in a lot of overtime and saved his money. Nebraska was a lot colder than he was used to, having spent most of his life in Florida. But when winter rolled around, he decided to enjoy the weather instead of bitch about it. He bought himself a Polaris 600 Indy snowmobile and rode off into the woods. Maybe you're wondering how a squirrel with such tiny arms could operate a snowmobile. The answer is, he operated it pretty shittily. In fact, he couldn't even manage to squeeze the brake lever at all. And so one day he went zooming through the woods and plowed straight into a den full of bears. Even though bears aren't native to that region of Nebraska, this family happened to be in the Witness Protection Program. Sometimes explanations are quite prosaic. Within the den was Mama Bear, Papa Bear, and a smart-ass little baby bear named Ranger. A year before baby Ranger was born, Papa Bear saw some bad shit go down back in Wyoming, and that's why the bears were in witness protection. This was the only bear family in the entire woods, and the squirrel just happened to crash his Polaris 600 Indy snowmobile straight into their den, smack in the midst of their hibernation. One skid of the snowmobile slammed into Ranger, sending him for a high-speed tumble. The poor little cub rolled and rolled and rolled, picking up snow as he went, until he looked just like a giant snowball. Mama Bear and Papa Bear awoke with a horrible start. They took one look at the squirrel in his snowmobile, one look at baby Ranger tumbling along, and they put 2 and 2 together pretty freaking fast. The squirrel realized his mistake right away. He was all set to apologize and beg forgiveness, but then suddenly remembered he had a reverse gear on his snowmobile, so instead he backed up real fast, turned around, and hauled ass on out of there. Papa Bear charged after the squirrel, but the Polaris Indy snowmobile was too fast. Once the squirrel was safely back home, he jumped off his snowmobile and whipped his stupid little tail going chitter, chitter, chitter. He shouted, "Stupid bears!" Then he laughed and laughed. The squirrel was still a little asshole at heart. Nevertheless, he didn't dare go back into the woods, and before long he placed an ad on Craigslist to sell his snowmobile. This, as we shall see later, was a very big mistake. Chapter 3. Even Bears Have Bad Days. It was a bad day for the bears. Mama Bear had been dreaming of delicious berries when the snowmobile crashed into the family den. Papa Bear was having a nightmare about the bad shit he saw go down in Wyoming. And baby Ranger was in the midst of a dream where he was on The Ellen Show for being the world's most clever bear. In fact, he was just about to dazzle Ellen DeGeneres by casually mentioning that he solved the New York Times crossword puzzle every Sunday. In pen, of course, he would add, confident that the studio audience would respond with a collective ooh of astonishment. Ooh. That's when the snowmobile skid slammed into him. As he went tumbling through the snow, all thoughts of talk shows and crossword puzzles and Ellen DeGeneres vanished from his clever little head. Papa Bear was absolutely enraged, as was to be expected. He charged after the squirrel, but didn't really stand a chance of catching him. The squirrel was on a Polaris snowmobile, after all, and Papa Bear had just been violently roused from a nightmare. He didn't even have time to properly stretch before chasing the squirrel, and so ended up pulling a hamstring. Mama Bear dashed over to Baby Ranger and dug him out of the big snowball. She wept and hugged him. When she let him go, the cub had trouble standing up because he was so dizzy and scared. The bears went back inside their den, but they couldn't get back to sleep, not after having been rammed at full speed by a dumbass squirrel on a snowmobile. Who can sleep after something like that? Mama Bear hugged Baby Bear some more. She cooed at him and walked him. Papa Bear didn't really know what to do, so he patted Mama Bear on the head and grumbled, "There, there, wife." He stood around nervously, watching Mama Bear coo at Ranger, then stomped off to his garage. Yes, he had a garage. In fact, most bears do. For more information on this, watch Animal Planet. Anyway, Papa Bear went into his garage and began to build. He wanted to construct the ultimate squirrel destroyer. He thought about that scene in Iron Man where Tony Stark fabricated a high-tech weaponized suit while being held prisoner in a cave in Afghanistan. The Bears only had 3 DVDs in their collection: Iron Man, The Princess Bride, and Iron Man 2. Papa Bear played a Black Sabbath album and cranked the volume high when it came to Iron Man. He got really stoked about building his own high-tech suit, this one with a giant metal grappling appendage and a laser cannon. He drew up schematics and pieced together steel bars and welded and played air guitar along with Ozzy. Later, when Mama Bear stuck her head in the garage, he turned the music down and smiled sheepishly at her. "What are you doing in here?" Mama Bear demanded. Papa Bear shuffled his feet and said, "Oh, nothing much." "Really? You mean you're not trying to build some sort of ultimate squirrel destroyer?" "Oh, well, maybe. He hurt our boy. He hurt, what's his name again?" "His name is Ranger, like I keep telling you. But you don't have to build a machine to get the squirrel. You're bigger and stronger than the squirrel. You could easily squish him with one paw, or you could bite him and that would be the end of it." "Yes, dear," said Papa Bear, then got right back to work on his ultimate squirrel destroyer once Mama Bear went back to the den. The next day, a lot of Papa Bear's enthusiasm drained away when he realized that he had no idea where to find the squirrel. He thought about asking his kid for help because he was a smart little cub, but he really didn't want to encourage the boy to think too much about stuff because that's how folks get in trouble. He wondered if maybe getting slammed with a snowmobile skid and sent for a high-speed tumble had scrambled Baby Ranger's brain. That would solve the dilemma of having a too smart for his own good cub. On the other paw, he didn't want the boy to come out too dumb. Papa Bear really preferred to have a son who was not too smart, not too dumb, but just right in the brains department. Well, as it turned out, even though the snowmobile incident had stunned poor little Ranger, he was still smart as ever. After the family finally settled back into hibernation, the cub quietly got up, turned on his MacBook, and began to surf the internet. A short while later, he woke his parents, jumping up and down with excitement. "What's all this damn nonsense?" grumbled Papa Bear. "Be sweet, dear," chided Mama Bear. "What is it, Ranger?" "I found him," said Ranger, and turned the laptop around so his folks could see. "He posted an ad to sell his snowmobile, and I have his phone number." And sure enough, there was a picture of the Polaris snowmobile that had crashed into their den, and posed on the top was the squirrel himself. Mama Bear shuddered, but Papa Bear growled with excitement. Papa Bear was just about to run off to the garage when Baby Ranger said, "Wait, Papa, I have something else to show you about the squirrel." Chapter 4. Baby Bear is not so stupid after all. Baby Ranger, being smarter than the average bear, had conducted a public records search and found that the squirrel had been involved in some sort of skirmish back in Florida. Something involving a 60mm machine gun, a flamethrower, a rocket launcher, and an alligator. Once the whole family had read the police report, Mama Bear said, "Oh my." Papa Bear's eyes blazed and his mouth turned up in a huge smile, and he laughed and laughed and laughed. "What is it, dear?" his wife asked. "What do you find so funny?"
"I have an ally against the squirrel,"
roared Papa Bear, pointing at the photo of the alligator.
"We shall join forces and together we shall destroy that rodent. Get me that alligator's phone number, Baby Bear."
"Right here, Papa." Papa Bear stomped out of the den while Mama Bear called after him, "It's just a tiny little squirrel." But Papa Bear was already well out of earshot, bounding off through the woods, pulling his cell phone out of his pocket. Chapter 5. Success comes naturally to alligators. The alligator put in a lot of hours each week building his business, but it was well worth it. With strong guidance from his new friends, his catering service quickly took off. Within a few months, he was delivering fine food to multiple weddings every week and had to hire an accountant to keep track of the cash flow. He bought himself a Harley-Davidson Fat Boy and rode through his neighborhood revving the engine, just daring the neighborhood association to say something. Nobody did. Everyone in the neighborhood knew better than to screw with the alligator. Eventually, his business was running so efficiently that he was able to take some time off, confident that his employees could handle everything. This time, he finally fulfilled his dream vacation of staying home and watching Apocalypse Now over and over for a week straight. At the end of the week, his phone rang. When he answered, the voice on the other end of the line said,
"Is this the alligator who had all that trouble with a horrible little squirrel?"
The voice was deep and growly and bear-like. Chapter 6. Sometimes bears and alligators can become friends. Papa Bear told the alligator all about how the asshole squirrel had crashed into his den with his snowmobile.
"What'd you do?"
asked the alligator.
"I went into my garage and began building a high-tech weapon suit,"
Papa Bear told him.
"Then my boy tracked him down online and got his phone number. Now I got the suit built, so I'm going to go and destroy him."
"Does the suit have a giant metal grappling appendage and a laser cannon?"
"Of course."
"Very good," said the alligator. "Call the squirrel and get his address, but wait for me. We'll ambush him together." After the alligator hung up, he went to his garage and strapped the 60mm machine gun, the flamethrower, and the grenade launcher to his back. He put on a pair of really stylish sunglasses, then climbed on his Harley Fat Boy and revved the engine. Chapter 7. Squirrels often get overconfident. During all this time, the squirrel was feeling pretty cocky. He had crashed into a den of bears with his snowmobile, sending one of them for a big tumble, and got away without so much as a scratch. Yeah, the squirrel thought he was a real badass. Of course, he wasn't quite confident enough to take his snowmobile back into the woods. He was cocky, not stupid. He kept his Craigslist ad posted, figuring he'd just have to take up a different pastime, one suited to his badass new self. Something like kickboxing. He spent a lot of time strutting about his studio apartment, listening to his George Thorogood album, and really cranking up the volume when it came to bad to the bone. He called his therapist, the one who had been helping him overcome his alligator anxiety, and said that he was all better now and would no longer require his services. The therapist started to object, but the squirrel cut him off, going chitter, chitter, chitter. Then he hung up the phone. On a side note, the therapist was upset with the squirrel's bullshit. So later that day, he went into his garage and began to build. He built a nice birdhouse. It wasn't the fanciest of birdhouses, but it was sturdy, and he was proud of it. More importantly, it had taken the therapist's mind off the squirrel's abuse, and so he was able to move on with his life without resorting to violence. The squirrel found a gym where he could learn kickboxing. He met a lot of successful folks at the gym and became best friends with a possum named Carl. Carl had a sales position with a multinational firm and had taken up kickboxing in order to overcome his instinct to play dead in tense situations.
I think you'd fit right in on the sales team,
Carl told the squirrel.
Let me talk to the boss, see what I can swing.
The squirrel asked if there was a lot to learn, but Carl said,
Don't sweat it, it's not rocket science.
Then to himself, the possum sighed and muttered,
Oh, if only it was rocket science.
The squirrel didn't know why the possum uttered this cryptic remark, nor did he ask his new friend about it since he was still a self-centered little asshole. Within a week, the squirrel was hired on as a salesman. He bought some flashy suits so he could impress his new boss. This really drained his bank account, but then he got a call asking if the snowmobile was still available. He had all but lost hope of selling it since the weather had turned warm and most of the snow had melted. He eagerly told the caller that yes, it was still available. Then he gave the caller his address. In the excitement, he didn't even notice that the caller's voice was deep and growly and bear-like. Chapter 8. Alligators look really cool in sunglasses. The alligator knew he should get back to work running his catering business. That would be the sane, rational thing to do. But then he thought about how the squirrel would say, "Good morning, dumbass," and how he would whip his stupid little tail and go chitter, chitter, chitter. He shifted his Harley Fat Boy into gear and roared through the neighborhood with a 60mm machine gun, flamethrower, and grenade launcher strapped to his back. A few minutes later, he hit the highway and opened the throttle wide. Somewhere in Georgia, a state trooper pulled him over. The trooper was upset that the alligator was doing 122 in a 55 zone, and was also wondering why the gator had a machine gun, a flamethrower, and a grenade launcher strapped to his back. The alligator told the state trooper all about his problem with the asshole squirrel. As it turned out, the state trooper had just such a squirrel in his own backyard. He fed it every day, and yet the rodent still had the audacity to go chitter, chitter, chitter at him whenever he stepped out his back door. Also, the state trooper thought the alligator looked really cool in his stylish sunglasses while riding a Harley Fat Boy, so he wished him Godspeed and let him go without a ticket. That night, the alligator holed up in a roadside motel and watched Apocalypse Now. The motel served a continental breakfast of coffee and the best cinnamon rolls he ever tasted. He stayed another night, and then he lost all track of time watching Apocalypse Now and eating cinnamon rolls. Sometimes he wondered what the asshole squirrel was doing, and a couple times he thought about calling the bear, but mostly he just lounged about, watching his movie and feasting on rolls. Eventually, the alligator climbed back on his Fat Boy and roared the rest of the way across Georgia. He looked cool, leaned back on his big bike and sporting his stylish shades. Somewhere in Tennessee, he stopped for barbecue and camped out on a baseball diamond. He drifted off to sleep, gazing up at the stars and dreaming of the horrible things he would do to that asshole squirrel. Chapter 9. In America, even squirrels can succeed. With his newfound confidence, the squirrel took to his sales position with gusto. He listened to motivational audio programs while driving to work in his Hyundai and pursued clients one after another with relentless fervor. He drew upon his stage acting experience to infuse his sales presentations with dramatic fire. One evening, he watched the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, and the next morning stormed into the office shouting, "Always be closing! Always be closing!" He hungered to succeed and dreamt of trading in his Hyundai for a BMW. Whenever he felt his confidence begin to wane, he thought about how he had crashed into a den of bears with his snowmobile and lived to talk about it. Then he'd whip his tail and go chitter, chitter, chitter until his client signed on the line, which is dotted. He was never quite sure what he was selling, but he sold a lot of them. The squirrel quickly became the top salesman in the company and was given his own office overlooking the city. He was happy to be out of the maze of cubicles, but kind of felt bad about leaving behind Carl, the possum who had gotten him the job in the first place. His friend had stopped talking to him. Possums are not good salespeople. This is not prejudice, but scientific fact. For more information on this, watch Animal Planet. Carl, being somewhat of a failure at work, didn't have much. He drove a crappy little gremlin, his house was in a bad neighborhood and had a leaky roof. He was behind on his mortgage. The one thing he did have was a garage. And one day, after the squirrel came bounding into the office doing a victory dance and going chitter, 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 Carl the possum went home, poured himself a bowl of Lucky Charms, stepped into his garage, and began to build. Chapter 10. Alligators are never too tired to drink Lowenbrow. It wasn't easy for the alligator to ride his Harley Fat Boy all the way from St. Augustine, Florida to Omaha, Nebraska, with a 50mm machine gun, a flamethrower, and a grenade launcher strapped to his back. But he managed to not only do it, but to also look cool for most of the trip. When he arrived at the bear's den, he was exhausted, but also happy to meet Papa Bear and talk shit about the asshole squirrel. Papa Bear and the alligator polished off a case of Lowenbrow while devising plans to destroy the squirrel.
First thing in the morning,
Papa Bear growled.
we get up, we hunt down the squirrel, and we destroy him.
Yes, said the alligator.
Bright and early.
A short time later, Papa Bear and the alligator passed out cold and slept for 2 weeks. Chapter 11. Possums have a secret talent. As numerous documentaries on Animal Planet will attest, possums are horrible salespeople. A possum will drop to the ground and feign death during a tense situation, hence the term playing possum. Then, the animal will give off a foul stench in order to further convince any potential predator that not only is it deceased, but it has been expired for quite some time, and therefore its flesh is no longer edible. This behavior has served the marsupial species well in the wild for thousands of years, but tends to work against the animal in a corporate setting. Carl tried to fight his instinct, but more often than not, the pointed questions that arose in a sales presentation would trigger his Death Act response, and he'd flop onto the floor reeking of death. Not too many people wanted to do business with poor Carl, and so his career floundered. Carl often regretted going into sales, and wished he had instead followed through on his dream of joining NASA. He had studied physics in college and had a flair for rocketry, as do many possums. Now Carl finally found a use for his real talents. He spent his evenings designing and building a laser-guided missile that could zero in on any target he chose. This was very therapeutic for the lowly, underachieving marsupial, but potentially unfortunate for a certain asshole squirrel from Florida. Chapter 12. A good breakfast is important before a rampage. When Papa Bear and the alligator awoke, Mama Bear was in the kitchen making a big breakfast. The family was just coming out of hibernation and would be famished. Plus, she noticed that Papa Bear had brought home an alligator, and she knew alligators had hearty appetites. Everybody ate, except Baby Ranger, who was still asleep. Mama Bear had cooked pancakes, sausage, and French toast. Once they finished, Papa Bear said,
The alligator and I are going to the garage. We got stuff to do.
"What kind of stuff?" Mama Bear demanded.
Big, important stuff that you need not worry about,
growled Papa. He kissed Mama Bear, but she only scowled and turned her back. Once in the garage, Papa Bear and the alligator got to work, making sure the 60mm machine gun, flamethrower, grenade launcher, and iron suit were all tuned up and ready to go. At one point, Mama Bear stuck her head in the door and said, "Papa, can I have a word?" The alligator made the sound of a cracking whip. Papa Bear shuffled out after her with his shoulders hunched. He came back a few minutes later, grumbling to himself. The alligator chuckled and said, "I'm happy to be single and free.
Don't got no woman telling me what to do, no siree.
Papa Bear grumbled some more, shrugged his shoulders, and muttered,
At least I'm not sleeping alone tonight.
Oh,
said the alligator.
well, I guess there is that.
You think the squirrel will be home?
Papa asked.
Yep,
Said the alligator.
it's Sunday morning.
The alligator smiled as he thought about that glorious Sunday morning a few months prior when he went after the squirrel with the 60mm machine gun, flamethrower, and grenade launcher. Now he had a bear with him. A bear with an iron suit equipped with a giant metal grappling appendage and a laser cannon. The alligator strapped his arsenal on his back, donned his stylish sunglasses, and straddled his Harley Fat Boy. He fired the bike up, flashed a toothy grin, and said, "Hop on." Chapter 13. Squirrels are rarely as tough as they think they are. The squirrel had been raking in bonuses left and right and had pretty much forgotten about selling his snowmobile. Somebody had called about it a while back, and the squirrel had given his address, but nobody ever showed up. He climbed atop the Polaris, sitting outside his apartment complex. It was early spring and all the snow had melted, but he fired it up just to hear the engine rumble. He thought back to that day he crashed into the den of bears, sending one for a tumble. He grinned. Yeah, he was a badass little squirrel. He looked forward to the next winter when he'd take his Polaris back out to the woods, not afraid of anything. It was the bears who had better watch out for him. He revved the engine, whipped his tail, and went chitter, chitter, chitter. Then, as if in response to the revving snowmobile engine, he heard another engine rumble and roar. He revved the snowmobile some more, and a few seconds later, the other engine roared right back at him, much closer this time. The squirrel was having the time of his life, until he glanced up and beheld his worst nightmare speeding toward him on the back of a Harley-Davidson Fat Boy. Chapter 14. Just like Tom Cruise.
There he is,
Papa Bear shouted over the roar of the Harley.
on the back of his snowmobile.
The audacity of the little rodent. The gator swung the big Harley into a long curve, aiming for his nemesis. He came to a stop, cut the engine, stepped off the bike, and took aim with the flamethrower. Papa Bear lumbered off and powered up his laser cannon, then advanced on the squirrel, reaching out with his giant metal grappling appendage. The squirrel screamed, and it was a glorious sound. Then they heard another scream, this one coming from overhead. Papa Bear, the alligator, and the squirrel all looked up just in time to spot a missile blazing across the sky. It began its descent, and moments later they saw that it was headed straight for the squirrel's apartment complex. Its trajectory adjusted slightly, and then it blasted right through the bedroom window of the squirrel's very own apartment. The squirrel thought about his DVD collection of Tom Cruise movies, now surely destroyed, and screamed, "No!" Debris shot from the apartment in a hot wind. Papa Bear and the alligator covered their faces, while the squirrel rocketed off on the Polaris. Steering was almost impossible since there was no snow, and he couldn't manage the brake levers, but what else could he do? He didn't even think about it, he just took off full speed. The squirrel came roaring at the bear and the alligator. The two big animals were still covering their faces against the debris and didn't even see the squirrel until he was upon them. The asshole rodent blasted right between them, sending the apex predators toppling like giant bowling pins. The squirrel kept his little hand hard on the throttle and weaved through yards and driveways and streets. It only took a couple seconds for the bear and the alligator to recover themselves, but that was enough time for the rodent to get a good lead and make his escape. Behind him, a flamethrower blew up cars, while a 60mm machine gun ripped through houses and trees and apartment complexes. A laser cannon hit a fire hydrant, releasing a great geyser of cold water. The squirrel whipped his tail hard and went chitter, chitter, chitter while his snowmobile roared along over dry ground. He screamed with both fear and exhilaration, feeling strangely like his favorite actor, Tom Cruise, in Mission Impossible. Chapter 15, Chitter, Chitter, Chitter. The squirrel got lucky. By the time Papa Bear and the alligator got themselves and their weapons back on the Harley Fat Boy, the rodent was out of sight, and they ended up tearing off in the wrong direction. The squirrel didn't know this, though, and so he kept going full speed. He hit the highway, but after just a few more miles ran out of gas. Adrenaline coursing through his tiny body, he leapt from the snowmobile and stuck out his thumb. Before long, he was picked up by a long-haul trucker named Dale. The squirrel climbed in the cab of the Peterbilt and went chitter, chitter, chitter. The trucker roared with laughter and boomed, "Oh, at last some good conversation." The squirrel traveled with Dale all the way to the California coast, popping Dexedrine, taking turns at the wheel, and going chitter, chitter, chitter. Their conversation went something like this. Chitter, chitter, chitter. "Yeah, tell me about it. Alligators can be dangerous." Chitter, chitter, chitter. "Bears near Omaha? Well, they must have been in the witness protection program." Chitter, chitter, chitter. "I don't say. Tom Cruise is my hero too." Chitter, chitter, chitter. "You live quite an exciting life, my little friend. You know, I almost feel like we're brothers." After Dale dropped the squirrel off in San Francisco, the rodent snuck aboard a freighter bound for Hawaii. His life had taken quite an unexpected turn. It was scary but exciting, and once again he was feeling like quite the badass. He stole a pen and a steno book and began writing his adventures, starting with the Sunday morning when his neighbor, the alligator, came after him with a 60mm machine gun, a flamethrower, and a grenade launcher. He used a lot of onomatopoeia words like bang and whoosh and rat-a-tat-tat. He fell asleep as a stowaway, feeling like a character out of a Jack London novel. Chapter 16, The Work of a Possum. After several miles, the alligator pulled the fat boy off the side of the road. It was obvious they had lost the squirrel. He said, "So what do we do now?" Papa Bear said, "I don't know, but I got a kid. I forget his name, but he's one of those too smart for his own good kind. He might have some ideas." "Give Mr. Smarty Pants a call," said the alligator. Papa Bear grabbed his cell phone and got Mama Bear on the line. Mama said that Ranger was still sleeping, but Papa said, "Wake him up." After his cub came to the line, Papa told him everything that had gone down and said, "So, smart guy, got any suggestions?" "You said a missile blasted through his apartment window?" "Yeah, that's right." Baby Ranger thought a bit, then said, "Sounds like the work of a possum."
"What?"
"Possums are good with rocketry, Dad. Don't you ever watch Animal Planet?" Papa Bear grunted. "Yeah, sounds like he got a possum mad at him. Probably one he works with, that's probably it. You know where he works?"
"How would I know that?"
Papa snapped. "Never mind, Papa. I'll look into it and find out who the possum is."
"What good'll that do me?"
Papa Bear grunted. "Trust me, Papa," said Baby Ranger. "Just trust me." Chapter 17, The Prayer of a Humble Possum. Carl the possum went to the squirrel's home, only to find that the entire neighborhood looked like a war zone. Not only was the squirrel's apartment obliterated, but cars and houses and trees had been burned, shot, and blown up. The police had barricades set up, opening them only to let in fire trucks and ambulances. Carl snuck past a barricade, dashed beneath a squad car, and dropped to the ground. All the police assumed he was dead since he stank so much and paid no attention. In this way, he was able to listen in on the radio chatter and find out exactly what happened. Seems an alligator with a flamethrower, a 60mm machine gun, and a grenade launcher was also after the squirrel, along with a bear. The bear was in an iron suit with a giant metal grappling appendage and a laser cannon. Somehow none of that surprised Carl very much. The squirrel, after all, really was a little asshole. Wouldn't it be awesome, he thought, if he could team up with the bear and the alligator? Surely the squirrel wouldn't stand a chance against such forces. And so he prayed to his possum god, the one who seemeth so very dead, but was actually very much alive. Oh, sneaky, stinky possum god, he prayed. Please unite me with this fine bear and this fine alligator, that we might prevail against our adversary, the asshole squirrel. Then his cell phone rang. Chapter 18. The Rise of El Bandito Misterioso. The last few months had been rough and traumatic for the squirrel. First, he had been violently attacked and driven from his home in Florida. Then, after building a new life in Omaha, his apartment was destroyed and he once again found himself on the run, leaving behind his lucrative sales job, his friends, and his Polaris Indy 600 snowmobile. He coped with it all by adopting a new persona, one that could never be bothered by danger. Once in Hawaii, he went to a barber shop and grabbed a lock of hair that had fallen to the floor. He glued it beneath his nose so that he now had a big new mustache. A short time later, he swiped a hat from a child's doll, and it happened to be a perfect fit. And thus, he was transformed from common squirrel into El Bandito Misterioso. No amount of 60mm machine gun rounds could ever frighten the likes of El Bandito Misterioso. And flamethrowers? Iron suits with giant metal grappling appendages and laser cannons? Bah! El Bandito Misterioso scoffed at such trifles. El Bandito Misterioso slipped smoothly, quietly, and mysteriously from place to place. He wrote of his adventures, real and imagined, in the steno book he stole while aboard ship. He feasted at luau's and slept on beaches, gazing up at the stars and dreaming his mysterious dreams. One day, he spotted a group of tourists racing around on jet skis, and his mind flashed back to the time he had slammed into the den of bears with his snowmobile. El Bandito Misterioso dashed over to the marina, and when nobody was looking, jumped on a jet ski and took off across the water at high speed. All was going splendidly for El Bandito Misterioso, until he slammed smack into the side of a great white shark. It was a huge and hungry shark. In fact, not only was it hungry, but it just happened to be the hungriest shark in the entire ocean. This huge, hungry shark looked at the squirrel, now floundering in the water next to his fallen jet ski. The shark opened his massive mouth, flashing large, sharp teeth. El Bandito Misterioso tried to climb back on the jet ski, but kept slipping off back into the water. He tried to swim away, but there was no escaping the hungry, hungry shark. Chapter 19. A Star is Born. To succeed in the movie business, you must be ambitious. You must be driven. You must be hungry. And this shark was very, very hungry to succeed. He had been swimming around the Hawaiian Islands for weeks, drinking Bacardi and searching for new talent for his upcoming movie. He had been getting very discouraged. But then, just as his spirits had sunk to their lowest point, this amazing squirrel slammed into him on a jet ski. The rodent sported a big mustache and a hat. The shark opened his mouth very wide in surprise and delight.
You're just what I've been looking for,
the shark proclaimed, waving his bottle of Bacardi. The little squirrel ceased his frantic splashing, began to tread water, and turned toward the giant shark. The squirrel went, "Cheater, cheater, cheater."
I need you,
the shark said.
I need you to star in my new movie.
Cheater, cheater, cheater.
Who am I? Who am I? Why, I am known far and wide as the Great White Director. And who might you be?
Cheater, 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 El Bandito Misterioso!
course you are. Of course you are. Now, will you agree to star in my new movie? Cheater! Excellent!
The great white director drank some more Bacardi and explained that his new movie was to be an action-packed thriller, and it was to be filmed right there in beautiful Maui. The squirrel's little heart went pitter-pat at the thought of becoming a big action star like his hero, Tom Cruise. El Bandito Misterioso abandoned the jet ski and rode upon the shark's fin as they discussed the exciting new film. Then the shark said,
"You simply must meet my costume designer."
The shark swam closer to shore, and before long he spotted his costume designer, who just happened to be a moray eel. The shark introduced El Bandito Misterioso to the eel. Now, El Bandito Misterioso had been eating at a lot of luau's since he arrived in Hawaii, and had therefore packed on a bit of weight. And as you might know if you happen to watch Animal Planet, moray eels are never fat. What's more, moray eels detest anyone who is even the slightest bit overweight. Also, moray eels are quite obnoxious.
What do you think of my new star?
The shark asked the eel. The moray eel eyed El Bandito Misterioso and whined,
"He's fat, but he's my new star. Come on, look at him. Look at that mustache, that stylish cap."
"He's fat," the moray eel droned. "Fat!" The big shark opened his mouth wide and lunged for his costume designer. The moray eel swam away just as fast as he could, which was saying a lot since he took an aerobics boot camp class 3 times a week. The eel didn't dare return, and so the great white director had an opening for a new costume designer. In the intervening days, he interviewed many prospects before finally settling on a very talented sea turtle who had once worked for Francis Ford Coppola.
"What do you think of my new star?"
the shark asked the sea turtle. Word had gotten around about what happened to the shark's previous costume designer, and so the sea turtle said, "Why, he's the most handsome squirrel I've ever seen. I love his mustache, and look at that stylish cap." The great white director proclaimed,
"You will go far, my friend."
Chapter 20. Squirrels Do Their Own Stunts. Aboard the great white director's private yacht, named the SS Bacardi, the squirrel and the shark talked for hours about the upcoming movie. At one point, the squirrel showed the shark his notebook, in which he had written his adventures, both real and imagined.
"Where'd you get this notebook?"
the shark asked. "I stole it," proclaimed El Bandito Misterioso. "Well, stowed away on a freighter."
Of course you did. Of course you did. Just like a character out of a Jack London novel.
They filmed several scenes of the movie, taking a break only long enough to fly to Burbank, California to appear on The Ellen Show. The great white director talked about his ever-burgeoning movie career. Then El Bandito Misterioso dazzled Ellen with his story of the time he crashed his Polaris snowmobile into a den of bears and lived to talk about it.
Ooh.
Back aboard the SS Bacardi in Hawaii, the shark told El Bandito Misterioso his plans for the next thrilling scene, in which the squirrel would ride a Yamaha Wave Runner jet ski up a big ramp, go blasting over Maui, pass near a volcano, reach down to grab a damsel in distress, fling said damsel onto the back of the Wave Runner, and land on another ramp on the far side of the island. The squirrel wondered if maybe a damsel in distress was a bit cliché, not to mention disempowering to women. But the shark assured him,
"Oh, don't you worry. I have an up-and-coming starlet named named Linda Lancaster, and she absolutely loves the idea. Otherwise, she would have put a rider in her contract prohibiting it."
The two talked more about the jet ski leap over Maui, their excitement building and building.
"This will be an absolutely epic scene,"
proclaimed the great white director, enthusiastically waving his Bacardi.
One that will surely go down in cinematic history.
El Bandito Misterioso jumped up and down with excitement as the shark went on and on about the details of the shot and all the camera angles and the sound effects. El Bandito Misterioso loved sound effects. The squirrel went, cheater, 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 whoosh, splash, bang. The shark cried,
Yes, that's the spirit.
El Bandito Misterioso said, I can hardly wait. Who will be my stunt double? At that, the shark ceased talking, stopped waving his Bacardi, and fixed El Bandito Misterioso in a hard, cold stare. His smile had disappeared.
Stunt double? Stunt double?
Cheater?
The shark said, I am not that kind of director. I never use stunt doubles.
The squirrel's heart grew cold. Cheater, cheater, cheater.
Cheater nothing, said the shark. You think Tom Cruise lets a double do his stunts? I think not.
Upon hearing the name of his cinematic hero invoked, El Bandito Misterioso gritted his little teeth and said, Of course I will do my own stunts. I would have it no other way. Then he whipped his tail and went cheater, cheater, cheater. Chapter 21. Enter the Possum. Papa Bear and the alligator returned to the den. Baby Ranger was sleeping and, once again, dreaming of being on the Ellen Show. Mama Bear had been watching the news and was none too happy. She had seen Papa and the alligator leave the den with a machine gun, flamethrower, grenade launcher, and an iron suit with a giant metal grappling appendage and a laser cannon. And now the neighborhood in which the squirrel resided looked like a war zone. It seemed a bit too much for coincidence. Is this your doing? Mama Bear demanded, pointing to the TV screen where they were panning past the aftermath of destruction.
Oh, could be,
said Papa Bear.
Oh yeah, that was totally us,
the alligator said.
Except somebody else flew a missile into the rodent's apartment. But all the rest of that is totally our doing.
Mama Bear took Papa Bear by one ear and hauled him out of the den, saying, Can I have a word with you? The alligator made the sound of a cracking whip, whoosh, but only after the bears were out of earshot. When the bears came back inside, everybody agreed that it would be wisest to leave the whole squirrel business alone from now on. I'll have no more talk of this madness, Mama Bear said. You've got a family to think about.
Yes, dear,
Papa Bear muttered, hanging his head. The alligator snickered until Mama Bear turned her harsh glare his way. Then he quieted and flashed her a big grin. Okay, so we're all in agreement, Mama Bear said. Papa Bear and the alligator both said,
Yeah.
Then there was a knock on the front door. Mama Bear stomped over and opened it. She turned toward Papa Bear and said, You've got company. She stepped aside, and in walked a possum. Chapter 22. Mama Bear Speaks. The possum stepped inside, looked upon the two big bears, the little sleeping bear in one corner, and a grinning alligator wearing stylish sunglasses. He dropped to the floor of the den and gave off a stench that was so vile that it shocked Baby Ranger right out of a delightful dream, in which he was about to demonstrate his amazing skill with a Rubik's Cube for Ellen DeGeneres. Blindfolded, of course. It took quite some time to revive the possum, air out the den, and get Baby Ranger to shut up already about Ellen DeGeneres. Once all that was taken care of, Baby Ranger said, This is the possum who worked with the squirrel, the one who flew a missile into his apartment.
What's he doing here stinking up our den?
Papa Bear demanded. Be sweet, dear, Mama Bear said. Then to the possum, Can I get you some herbal tea?
Forget the tea,
Papa Bear snapped.
What's this creature doing in my den?
I can track down the squirrel, said Carl the possum. The alligator said,
You can? How?
With drones and
facial recognition software, of course. How else?
Mama Bear said, "Oh, no, you don't. We all agreed that this squirrel business has gone far enough.
But, honey,
Don't honey me. Far enough."
yes, dear.
The alligator made the sound of a cracking whip, whoosh, but scurried on out of the den when Mama Bear, all riled up now, turned her high-power glare his way. "Now, if you will excuse me, I'm going to watch a little TV and try to relax," said Mama Bear. She turned on the television, and Baby Ranger said, "It's time for Ellen!" So she clicked the channels until the Ellen Show appeared. Her guests were the Great White Director and El Bandito Misterioso.
That squirrel looks familiar,
Papa Bear said.
but it can't be the squirrel we know. Not with that mustache and stylish cap.
Baby Ranger came over, held one finger over the mustache, and said, "How about now, Dad?" Papa Bear's eyes went wide. Then the squirrel launched into a spirited account of the time he rammed into the den. While Ellen and the audience laughed uproariously at his description of the baby bear rolling and tumbling through the snow, the squirrel whipped his tail and went cheater, cheater, cheater. Mama Bear bared her teeth and growled, "Go get that squirrel and don't come back until the job is done!" Mama Bear was a fearsome sight, and even the alligator cowered before her. Papa Bear hung his head. Baby Ranger ran and hid. Then Carl the Possum dropped to the floor and drove everyone out of the den with his rancid stench. Chapter 23. A Penguin is Summoned. For some reason, El Bandito Misterioso looked nervous at the prospect of jumping over Maui, reaching down to snatch a damsel in distress from a volcano, and landing on the other side of the island while on the back of a wave runner. The Great White Director quickly determined the problem, along with its solution. He swam up to where the squirrel sat atop the wave runner and said,
Here, have a drink of this.
He handed the squirrel his bottle of Bacardi. The squirrel tipped back the bottle and drank, then drank some more. The more he drank, the more courage flowed through him. He handed the bottle back to the shark. The shark said to the squirrel,
Don't worry, it's perfectly safe.
Then shouted,
Suicide leap of death!
"Take one," and snapped his clapperboard. El Bandito Misterioso took off on the wave runner full throttle. He sped through the water and hit the ramp, all the while going cheater, cheater, cheater. The jet ski shot up the ramp but quickly lost momentum and ground to a halt. It balanced at the very end of the ramp. The Great White Director gazed at the jet ski for a moment, then pulled out his cell phone to call a certain penguin down in the Arctic Circle. He told the penguin that he needed a nitrous upgrade for a jet ski. "How much nitrous?" asked the penguin.
Enough so it can jump over the island of Maui,
said the Great White Director. "That's quite an order, but I'll get right on it."
You're sure?
"Oh yeah, no problem. Piece of cake. Trust me, I'll send you a PayPal invoice." Chapter 24. Tracking the Squirrel.
So let me get this straight,
said the alligator.
Now we're going after the squirrel after all? Yeah,
said Papa Bear.
But first we gotta track him down.
The Ellen Show is filmed in Burbank, said Baby Ranger.
I'm on it,
said the possum, pulling forth an iPad from one pocket.
I have drones in the area.
Everyone gathered around the possum's iPad, watching the live footage from his drones. The poor little possum looked like he wanted to drop to the floor with everybody hovering over him, but he soldiered on. "This is exciting," said Baby Ranger. "Hey, look, there he is!"
Where?
Papa Bear asked. "Right there with that shark." And sure enough, the squirrel was riding in a red convertible along with a great white shark. They were passing a bottle of Bacardi back and forth and pulling into a car rental lot at the airport.
Where are they going?
asked the alligator.
Hold on,
said the possum.
I'll bring number 7 drone in a bit closer.
The picture zoomed in, then zoomed in some more, zeroing in on something sticking out of the shark's vest pocket. 2 plane tickets. "They're going to Maui," said Mama Bear. "So that's where you need to go."
Yes, dear. Just one problem,
said Papa Bear.
How are we going to get a 60mm machine gun, a flamethrower, a grenade launcher, and an iron suit with a giant metal grappling appendage and a laser cannon past TSA?
Who needs to fly? We can just ride my fat boy to Maui. Problem solved,
said the alligator. Mama Bear, Baby Ranger, and the possum exchanged looks. Then Papa Bear and the alligator stepped out of the den and into the garage, where they began to build. Chapter 25, Suicide Leap of Death. After 2 weeks, the Great White Director had everything set up for the suicide leap of death scene. The Penguin had flown his personal jet up from Antarctica to install the nitrous tanks on the jet ski. A beautician was on hand to make sure El Bandito Misterioso's mustache was precisely groomed. Cameramen with high-tech jetpacks zipped around, preparing to film the action from every angle. Linda Lancaster, the up-and-coming starlet, was precariously perched at the edge of a smoldering volcano, shouting, "Are you sure this is safe? I'm not comfortable with this. This is bullshit!" El Bandito Misterioso was on the jet ski, filled with liquid courage, whipping his tail and going cheeter, cheeter, cheeter with anticipation. The poor squirrel had suffered greatly over the past year, but now, at long last, he finally had a chance to make his life glorious, like the life of Tom Cruise. Jumping over the island of Maui and hauling a damsel in distress from the lip of a volcano in the process was risky, but he was more than willing to take that risk, and nobody was going to steal that away from him. The shark made sure the ramp was placed at the exact right location and was set at the exact right angle. There was a lot of science and geometry involved. The Great White Director was just about to snap his clapperboard when he heard the roar of a big engine. He gazed across the water, and his huge, tooth-lined jaw dropped. The squirrel looked. All the cameramen and all the production staff looked. The damsel in distress atop the volcano looked. The sea turtle who had once worked for Francis Ford Coppola looked. Nobody could quite believe what they saw. 1. An alligator wearing very stylish sunglasses. 2. A bear clad in an iron suit with a giant metal grappling appendage and a laser cannon. 3. A 60mm machine gun. 4. A flamethrower. 5. A grenade launcher. And 6. A possum. Of course, none of that was particularly surprising. What was truly shocking was that they were all atop a Harley Fat Boy, equipped with a hydrofoil and a rocket propulsion system, blasting across the water at an impossible speed. The shark called out, "Suicide leap of death! Take 2, and snapped his clapperboard mere moments before the Harley Fat Boy zoomed up the ramp. El Bandito Misterioso screamed, Chapter 26, Stealing the Show. Papa Bear and the alligator had equipped the Fat Boy with a hydrofoil. Then the possum installed a rocket propulsion system. While traveling across land to California, they crept along at a mere 120 miles per hour. But once past the California shore, the alligator opened the throttle wide. There was no traffic on the ocean, and so they traveled at an impossible speed, with the possum navigating, relaying directions to the alligator via headset.
There's a ramp 20 miles ahead,
The possum said.
Adjust trajectory minus 4.2 degrees. What kind of ramp?
Papa Bear asked.
A fun one,
The possum said. The possum was tired of running scared all the time. He was through dropping to the ground and stinking every time things got tense. For a long time, he yearned to be bold and daring. And so, when his drone spotted the ramp on the Maui shoreline, his heart leapt, for he knew that this was his opportunity to live life to its fullest at last. The alligator adjusted course, and then, whoosh! The They hit the ramp, rocketed up its length, and shot high into the air with the island of Maui speeding by below.
We're going right over that volcano!
Shouted the alligator.
I know!
The possum shouted back.
Isn't it great? And there are cameras everywhere,
Said Papa Bear.
And look there.
They looked. On the very lip of the volcano stood a young damsel, looking very distressed.
Should we rescue her?
Asked the possum.
I don't know,
Said the alligator.
She might be a feminist. We can get sued if we try to help. I think she wants our help.
Said Papa Bear.
She's too far away.
The possum said.
Nonsense.
Growled Papa Bear, then extended his giant metal grappling appendage way down. The appendage grabbed her and flipped her onto the back of the fat boy, where she wrapped her arms snugly around the alligator. They continued to shoot over the top of the island.
Another ramp dead ahead.
Said the possum.
Brace yourselves.
They hit the other ramp, zipped down its length, and splashed into the water. The alligator hit the brakes, and they came to a flashy, dramatic stop, spraying up a massive rooster tail wave. A cameraman zipped in with his jetpack for a close-up. The alligator slid his stylish sunglasses down over his nose and peered over the tops. He looked incredibly cool. The great white director came swimming over just as fast as he could. After he was able to catch his breath, he threw one fin across the alligator's shoulders and proclaimed, "My new star!" Chapter 27. Being smart is not always a bad thing. Very soon, the internet and the tabloids buzzed with news of the great white director's latest stars, Papa Bear, Carl the Possum, and an incredibly cool alligator in stylish sunglasses. El Bandito Misterioso's cinematic career was destroyed, but the paparazzi took to following the has-been Squirrel from one rehab center to another. Ellen DeGeneres wanted the new stars, the bear and the alligator and Carl the Possum, to appear on her show, but they were all much too busy wrapping up the final scenes of Death Leap. Ellen kept asking, though, and even pleaded with them to at least send somebody they knew and who would not mind being interviewed. Papa Bear thought and thought and thought, but could think of nobody who would want to be on Ellen's show, so he finally hired some random surf bum who was short on cash. Just kidding. Baby Ranger dazzled Ellen with his witty repartee, then casually mentioned that, for fun, he liked to play chess against his computer. On the highest setting, of course, he added, and the astonished audience went, ooh. Chapter 28. Where are they now? They all lived happily ever after, for the most part. The alligator married Linda Lancaster, the rising starlet who had played the damsel in distress. Even though they both became major action stars, they managed to avoid the Hollywood pitfalls of drugs and infidelity, and are still together to this day. Ms. Lancaster always has a rider in her movie contracts stipulating that she would never again be portrayed as a helpless victim or expected to perform within 1,000 yards of any volcano ever. Ever! Papa Bear was the alligator's best man, which entailed a lot of undercover agents working security due to Papa being in witness protection. The agent in charge of the bear's witness protection case, who happened to be a chain-smoking muskox, nearly had a nervous breakdown when Baby Ranger appeared on The Ellen Show. While standing next to the alligator at the altar, waiting for Linda Lancaster to walk up the aisle, Papa Bear very quietly made the sound of a cracking whip. The alligator smiled and removed his sunglasses. He looked very happy. Papa Bear's acting career was curtailed when the muskox threatened to pull the family from witness protection if they didn't get the hell out of the limelight, fast. They were relocated to 722 Lamont Boulevard, Eugene, Washington, 97405. Just look for the house with a big blue garage. You can't miss it. The suicide leap of death was all Carl the Possum really needed to overcome his fears and live a normal life. He applied to NASA, and after a tough and tense series of interviews, was hired on as a systems analyst. His career has been skyrocketing ever since. The great white director's costume designer, the sea turtle who had once worked for Francis Ford Coppola, designed many stylish outfits for Linda Lancaster Alligator, for which he received prestigious awards. His former costume designer, the moray eel, became a very hardcore aerobics boot camp instructor. During every session, he would taunt, "You're all fat! Everyone here is fat!" His classes were oddly popular. As for the asshole squirrel, well, he quite enjoyed having the paparazzi follow him around. What none of the entertainment reporters knew was that El Bandito Misterioso was actually perfectly sober all those times he went into rehab. He had quit drinking right after the suicide leap of death. The squirrel was secretly grateful that Papa Bear, the alligator, and Carl the Possum had made the suicide leap of death and stolen the show, because upon sober reflection, he was sure the stunt would have landed him in traction. This was made even more clear when, a short time later, he watched a special Animal Planet expose about the notoriously shoddy work of penguin engineers. One day, on a lark, he used his kickboxing skills on an obnoxious journalist from Entertainment Tonight, and suddenly his reputation as a drunken, asshole celebrity was cemented. He got in a few fights after that, but it was still a far safer road to fame than jumping a volcano on a freaking nitrous-fueled jet engineered by an incompetent penguin. The squirrel eventually dropped his El Bandito Misterioso persona, left Hollywood, and returned to the stage. His portrayal of Richard III was praised by fans, while critics favorably compared his performance to that of Laurence Olivier. But his proudest moment came one evening at curtain call. All the actors were taking their final bows when the squirrel happened to spot, in the very front row, one person in particular giving him an enthusiastic standing ovation. It was none other than his cinematic hero, Tom Cruise. And that, my friends, is the legend of the asshole squirrel. This has been Legend of the Asshole Squirrel, Adult Fairy Tales Book 1, written by Seth Chambers, narrated by Noah DeBias, sound design by Noah DeBias, copyright 2019 by Seth Chambers, production copyright by Seth Chambers. If you enjoyed Legend of the Asshole Squirrel, please check out other works by Seth Chambers, such as Little Einstein and You Better Watch Out, also available from audible.com.